Here's a couple tricks. You might say, wait, say that again. And they're like, I ran track in high school, right? So when you say, wait, say that again, that little trick says to the listener, oh, he says to say that again. That means this thing is pretty important. I better pay attention.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
Hey, podcaster, it's your podcast coach, Adam Adams, and we are talking about bringing things to the listener, keeping the listener with you, and helping them to be engaged. On this episode, I want to be able to support you to make sure that your listener doesn't go off into la land as much. So what are a few tips and tricks and strategies that you can use as you are having a solo episode and especially an interview episode? What can you be doing while you're sitting there with a guest to make sure that your listener isn't just hearing two people having a conversation and things going in one ear and out the other? What are the things you can be doing to make them not doze off? Here's a few tips, tricks, and strategies to allow you to do that. Number one, as you're having a conversation with, let's say, your guest, think about it like this. There's two ways to think about it. You either think about it as, I'm just having a one-on-one conversation with this one guest. Or you can think, me and my guest are having a conversation with my listener. Think about it again. Either I'm having a conversation with my guest, or my guest and I are having a conversation with a listener. Which way do you think is better? Which way do you think is going to support your podcast listener to make sure that they are coming with you along for the ride? And the answer is not that you are just going to have a one-on-one conversation with a guest and that your listener becomes a fly on the wall. Instead, come over to this other side where you and your guest are helping your listener. And your guest often forgets that they have listeners on the other side. Your guest often only thinks about you. And in fact, in some cases, it's easier for that guest to feel comfortable, like not nervous when they just have a conversation with you. So what does that mean? You've got to take a little bit of control of the conversation. I'm going to teach you a few ways to do this. Here's the first way. If you and your guest want to have a conversation with your listener, then what you're going to do is your guest says something to you, is your guest says something like, oh, yeah, I ran track in high school. And you are going to go, oh, here's a couple tricks. You might say, wait, say that again. And they're like, I ran track in high school, right? So when you say, wait, say that again, that little trick says to the listener, oh, he says to say that again. That means this thing is pretty important. I better pay attention. They might have been over here trailing off, thinking about all the other things in their life. They might have been thinking, what am I cooking for dinner tonight? They might have been thinking, oh, I can't believe I got in a fight with that one person tonight. I can't believe that they said that to me. Oh, I'm really hungry. If they might be trailing off, you can say a few things like this. Wait, can you tell me that one more time? Or why would that be important? Or, hey, I heard you say XYZ. For the listener, what does that mean? I heard you say XYZ. For the listener, what does that really mean? Can you go into more detail for our listener? Or, hey, you said an acronym that I never heard of. Can you tell me what that means to make sure that the listener is with us? And then the listener's like, oh, okay, I'm going to pay attention because this is an acronym. You might have been going through a whole bunch of letters like COP, AOD, DOD, DD, HOA, COC, cash on cash, whatever. You might be saying all these things. And the listener's like, man, I just don't know if I should be listening to this podcast because I don't understand what some of these mean. Maybe I needed a prerequisite. Maybe I needed to listen to a different podcast before listening to her podcast because she's way above me right now. So they're thinking I should just turn this off. I should just tune out. Do you want them to tune out? Absolutely not. So ask your guests things like that. You could say, you know what I got from that? And I'm wondering if the listener heard it too. Now all of a sudden the listener's like, wait, what is it? And they pay more attention. So that's how you can kind of get their attention, let them know that it's something that they should be focusing on, paying attention to, and also wrapping things up for them. I mean, for your listener. And what I mean by wrapping it up means toward the end of a conversation, maybe not the end of the whole podcast, but toward the end of a conversation, you might say, hey, I heard 3 big takeaways that I got from you about how to start a podcast successfully. Number 1, number 2, and number 3. Is that right? And then they'll go through it, they'll add to it, or they'll say, yeah, that's exactly right. And then you'll say, all right, to the listener, write those 3 things down. That way it'll help you to be able to make sure you have a strong podcast, or make sure that you don't break the law, or whatever your podcast is about. So there's just a few ideas, tips and tricks and strategies, ways of bringing the value, the information that you're talking about to the listener. One of the things that I said was all of these 3-letter acronyms to make sure that the listener understands what they mean. So you might say the cash on cash for this deal, this real estate deal, is blah, 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 blah. And if you haven't heard of cash on cash, that's fine. All it means is, and then you give them the definition. And then the listener's like, oh, yeah, I can be here. Another thing is you can say, hey, to the guest, hey, could you say that one more time? Another thing you could do is say, hey, let's talk about that in layman's terms, because I want to make sure I understand it. And I know if I understand it, the listener will too. So there's a few tips, tricks, and strategies. I'm looking forward to seeing you on the next episode. See you there.
This is serious. Don't go. Now that you've gotten whatever value that you feel that you got, the actionable takeaways, you need to implement the stuff that you learn. If you remember me talking about bird church once, and they learn how to fly, and then they walk home, I don't want you to walk home. I want you to fly home. So take the steps, take the actionable steps for your benefit so that you can become a better podcaster. That's the only thing that I ask of you. And I'll see you for more actionable tips on the very next episode.